The room was electric with tension even before she arrived. Reporters shuffled in their seats, murmuring to one another, exchanging whispered speculations about how Trump's newly appointed press secretary would handle her first high-stakes briefing. Caroline Leavitt had a reputation, sharp-witted, unflappable, and fiercely loyal to her boss. But this wasn't just another press conference. This was a battlefield, and Caroline knew it. She stepped to the podium with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent weeks preparing for this exact moment. Clad in a crisp navy suit, her blonde hair perfectly styled, she exuded the cool composure of a seasoned professional. The contrast between her calm exterior and the palpable hostility radiating from the press corps was striking. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, her voice cutting cleanly through the hum of the room. "Before we dive in, I'd like to set the record straight on one important matter." She paused, glancing up from her notes, her sharp eyes sweeping across the front row. If the media insists on setting the rules for outrage and moral judgment, the very least they could do is apply them evenly. A flicker of unease passed through the assembled journalists. They knew what was coming, but none of them were prepared for how effectively Caroline would wield her words. "Imagine, if you will," she continued, her tone deceptively light, "if a Republican stood at this very podium and called for violence in the streets. Imagine the wall-to-wall coverage, the fever-pitched demands for resignations, hearings, arrests." She let the hypothetical sink in before delivering the punchline. "But when Congresswoman Ilhan Omar says it, suddenly it's not dangerous incitement. It's just a passionate plea for justice." The room stiffened. A few reporters exchanged quick glances, unsure whether to challenge her or let the moment pass. Peter from CNN couldn't resist. "Caroline," he said, his voice laced with condescension, "are you really suggesting Ilhan Omar was calling for violence?" Caroline's expression didn't change. If anything, her smile grew just a fraction sharper. "I'm not suggesting anything, Peter." I'm quoting her. "Unless you're suggesting the Congresswoman didn't say those words." Peter faltered. "Well, context matters." "Exactly," Caroline said, pouncing. "Context matters. So does consistency. When Democrats use inflammatory language, the media scrambles to soften it, to rationalize it. When a Republican so much as questions a policy, you call it a threat to democracy." The room quieted again. Caroline had flipped the usual power dynamic. Press secretaries were supposed to play defense. Caroline was playing offense. "Let's play a game," she suggested, leaning slightly on the podium. "If President Trump stood here and said, 'We need to take this fight to the streets,' what would your headlines say tomorrow?" No one answered, so she did. It would be labelled an attack on democracy, a call to insurrection. We'd see breathless coverage, emergency broadcasts, and calls for impeachment. She paused, her gaze hardening. "But Ilhan Omar says it." And suddenly it's Tuesday. The silence was suffocating. Caroline had tapped directly into the grievance conservatives had been harbouring for years, the blatant double standard in media coverage. She didn't just point it out, she held it up like a mirror, forcing the press to stare at their own reflection. James from NBC cleared his throat, trying to steer the conversation into safer territory. "Caroline, are you implying that political rhetoric from both sides should be treated equally?" "I'm not implying anything, James," she said, her smile never wavering. "I'm saying it directly. Either we hold everyone to the same standard, or the media is no longer an impartial observer. It's a participant." The room tensed again, the implications of her words hanging in the air like smoke. Peter jumped in, eager to change the subject. "What about Elon Musk's appointment as head of the Department of Government Efficiency? Isn't that just rewarding a wealthy ally?" Caroline almost laughed. "You mean the same Elon Musk who revitalized the American space program, built one of the most successful American companies, and employs thousands of Americans? Or are we only supposed to vilify billionaires when they aren't writing checks to Democrats? Peter's face reddened. Caroline wasn't done. Funny how nobody had a problem when Mark Zuckerberg poured $400 million into influencing election operations, or when Jeff Bezos' newspaper conveniently omits any criticism of the left, while his company receives billions in federal contracts. But now, suddenly, a successful businessman helping to streamline government spending is a scandal. She let the contrast hang, watching the reporters scramble to recalibrate their approach. Let's talk about real favouritism, she said smoothly. Hunter Biden cashing in on his father's position. Nancy Pelosi's husband magically making perfect stock trades. Somehow, none of you seemed particularly interested in those stories. James tried to recover. But Caroline, the point is, Musk has direct influence over public policy now. Great, she said. I'd rather have someone who understands how to balance a budget and turn a profit influencing policy than a career politician who's never run so much as a lemonade stand. The tension was boiling over, but Caroline pressed on, moving to immigration. Peter, she said, since you brought up border enforcement, let's talk numbers. She listed them off. 8,000 arrests under Trump's policies, only 461 released due to medical exemptions or lack of detention space. Less than 6%, she emphasised. Yet your networks make it sound like we're handing out gift bags and bus tickets. James tried to interrupt. Doesn't that show the policy is failing? Caroline didn't flinch. No, it shows that Congress, led by Democrats, refuses to fund more detention space. It shows they'd rather have chaos at the border so they can campaign on the problem instead of fixing it. The conversation shifted to Gaza, with James pushing the narrative that Trump was forcibly displacing Palestinians. The media keeps asking what Trump is doing, Caroline said, her voice growing colder, but never asks why Gaza is unlivable. Why? Because Hamas turned it into a launch pad for terrorism. Peter cut in. But surely Trump's policies contributed. Hamas started this war, Caroline said, her patience thinning. But instead of demanding they surrender, you're demanding Trump justify defending innocent lives. The briefing was supposed to break Caroline. Instead, it was the media that left battered and bruised. The final question came from a young reporter in the back. Caroline, what do you say to people who claim this administration is too combative? Caroline paused, her gaze softening slightly. We've spent years watching the media attack conservatives, twist their words, and protect anyone with a D next to their name. If standing up for truth and calling out hypocrisy is combative, then so be it. She gathered her papers, her final words ringing out like a verdict. This isn't about journalism. It's about power, who gets protected and who gets destroyed. She stepped down from the podium, the silence in the room louder than any shouting match could have been. The press had come to bury her. Instead, they ended up exposing themselves. Caroline Leavitt's performance at the press briefing was more than a display of competence. It was a turning point. In a political climate where narratives are often shaped before facts are considered, her ability to systematically dismantle the media's selective outrage exposed the deeper problem: the erosion of trust between the American people and the press. By holding up a mirror to the media's double standards, she didn't just defend the Trump administration. She highlighted how the rules of accountability shift based on political affiliation. Her calm composure, paired with her incisive rhetoric, signalled that this administration would not retreat from confrontation. It would meet accusations head-on, armed with facts, context, and a willingness to question the very institutions meant to safeguard truth. More than just a spokesperson, Caroline Leavitt became a symbol of a larger battle, the fight to restore balance in political discourse. Whether the media chooses to reflect on their biases or double down, one thing became clear: this was only the beginning. With Caroline at the podium, the Trump administration had found not only a voice, but a formidable shield ready to expose hypocrisy and demand accountability from those who claim to uphold it. The real battle for truth had only just begun. If you enjoyed the story and found it meaningful, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps us reach more people. We'd also love to hear from you. Share your thoughts and the lessons you've learned in the comments below. Your insights could inspire someone